We were talking about the survey, and for people just joining us, Ray Carlson, if you can give us a little background on that survey.
The survey was conducted by the researchers at the psychology department at University of Akron, and the survey was done to try to gauge whether or not there is compliance with pharmacy rules, pharmacy law, federal law that requires pharmacists to do 3 basic categories of things. Now, each category has their specific things, but it's really basically 3 tasks that a pharmacist must do prior to dispensing a prescription. And the first of those categories is a pharmacist must make a reasonable attempt to obtain certain patient-specific information. Who are you? Your birth date, address, phone number, what disease states you have. Do you have a medical device? We must make a reasonable attempt to find out a little bit about you before we actually process the prescription. While processing the prescription brings us to category 2. While processing that prescription, we are to churn all the information that we receive from you on the front end, hopefully made a reasonable attempt to obtain, along with our education and the drug you have requested from us to give to you. If in doing that it is deemed safe, appropriate for your condition, your disease state, with other medications that you're taking, that it's not the same thing you got from another doctor yesterday, all of those sorts of considerations. And also, probably with respect to the opiate condition, that the drug is for a legitimate medical purpose. So that's called the drug utilization review portion of task number 2 that a pharmacist is to do. That's the active processing, so to speak, of the prescription.
Okay.
The legitimate medical purpose, funny, with Dr. Vargo being here, the pharmacist, by law, has an equal and corresponding responsibility with the physician to ensure that the prescription is for legitimate medical purpose. So the information we get, that first category of stuff we get from you on the front end, we churn all that through, we make sure it's appropriate, it's for a legitimate medical purpose, it's safe to hand you, and then once we decide it's okay to hand it to you, the manner in which we hand it to you has to somehow, according to the law, be clear that you know that you have the right to receive prescription counseling from the pharmacist, which means you have the right for me to sit down and tell you all of these maybe little concerns that I had as I was processing it, that I sit down. And the survey is checking the things that I didn't quite have for the judges to be considering when they toss the case out. Yeah. It is what it is. To collate it. Well, what do we find out? 40% of the customers don't even know who their pharmacist is. They believe, over 70-some%, don't believe the pharmacist doesn't know their name. And so we went through how much time is being spent getting the information that the pharmacist needs to have on the front end before they process a prescription. 72% of the time, they never ask whether or not you're on another medication. Any nutritional supplements? Never, 77% of the time. Rarely, 11%. What about non-prescription drugs you're taking? Over-the-counter. Some of the herbs and vitamins, some of the over-the-counters, we have had a number of prescription-only drugs go to over-the-counter just within the past few years, that some of these over-the-counter drugs are fairly potent. So non-prescription drugs taken, never. 77% of the time it's never asked if you're taking something over the counter. Most people won't go to the doctor until they've tried to fix something on their own. You're already starting out on a non-prescription, and then the doctor writes, well, maybe you didn't mention it to him. Maybe you're going to continue on something now that you're getting a prescription drug for. Never. 77% of the time added to 12, which is rarely. You're
this is a survey
80,
done by the
90%.
University of Akron.
Almost 90% of the time, never asked whether you're on an over-the-counter. Any medical devices. You got a catheter in? Do you use a catheter? Look how many people are using CPAP machines. We talk about overuse of prescription antibiotics. How do you know you're not coming in with the same sinus infection because you're not cleaning the hoses of your CPAP machine? What kind of device are you getting? Never. 80. Rarely. 11. almost 100% of the
Yeah.
time.
No one
Nobody
the
asks
pharmacist.
whether or not you have a device.
So
Boom.
again,
these things are important. Is it reasonable? Does it seem reasonable to you? Does it seem reasonable to the people that compliance with a specific law that suggests this information be got on the front end is only being gotten less than 10% of the time? That's on this one. This one's only 14% of the time. This one is only... So we go to the courts and we say, well, we're not really sure. I told on your program. What did we say? We suspect compliance rates to be between 5 and 10%, but we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. We'll say it's 20% of the time. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say it's 40 or 50% of the time. Is that reasonable for you? Is it reasonable that these companies are making so much money? And the thing of it is if it is so gross and so careless in nature, I could have gotten standing by just going with environmental laws. It could be so gross, this is a gross poisoning of the community. What's it matter if I staple it and put it in a bag and hand it to you and tell you this is okay to take to poison yourself, or if I'm dumping it in the Mahoning River and letting you somehow absorb it? It is more dangerous and worse for the health of a community if I'm putting it in a bag and handing it to you. That's why they call them dangerous drugs. I could have fallen back on environmental laws and been given automatic standing. Ray wouldn't have had to prove that this is an important issue, it's going to affect most of the community if you don't side with me, and people care about it.
I dare say, Ray Carlson, the
It's
court
sad.
failed.
And that's another issue. Not only is it a time issue for pharmacists today, but it's where the chains are stationing these pharmacists. Oh, the joke is they're like priests. The chains have them floating around. They don't want them in one place, because if all of a sudden you're gone, well, the community might miss you and say, well, why'd they get rid of so-and-so? We're not going to shop here anymore. They have them floating around. So we get to that second category of drug utilization review. Before I actually hand the drug to you, have I done the necessary things that were needed to do in order to ensure that this is safe for you to take? If in the end our education and our licensing deems that we are good to go, we'll initial it, sign it, put it in a bag, and say, here you go. But then we should let the patient know somehow that the right to receive prescription counseling from a pharmacist is available to them. What's the compliance with the counseling? 70% spend 0 time, another 20% less than a minute. So 90% of the patients that receive prescription medication, again, dangerous drugs as they're referred to by the Board of Pharmacy, these are dangerous drugs. All drugs, not just opiates, not just antibiotics.
Sure,
you're talking all dangerous drugs. 90% walk out without any
counseling.
We are a check and balance with the physician. With all due respect to Dr. Vargo, society has set up a check and balance. He shouldn't have to worry so much about certain aspects. His focus is on. Ours is a collection of disease states and what's a drug going to do, and interactions and side effects, and
you're right, the doctor shouldn't have to worry about that. You shouldn't have to worry about it.
And I hate to say it, to a certain extent, policing. We have an agency that polices us because, to a certain extent, we're supposed to police. We can't just. What if a physician just went rogue in a community and was just writing OxyContin everybody that came in, and pharmacists were just filling it and just letting them go out and not getting all the information out the drive-through window? A single individual could do a great deal of damage to a community.
Or a great amount of good.
We're a check and balance.
We've got a lot of room to improve based on what we're seeing here.
Yeah.
Law, equal and corresponding responsibility with physicians to ensure that it's for legitimate medical purpose. Taking that bottle of 90 OxyContin and selling it to somebody else is not a legitimate medical purpose. What signs might we ever see that might indicate to us that this is not being used for legitimate medical purpose? We don't always have to act on our intuitions, but you sure better go back under the patient profiling requirements and put some kind of note in. You're going to wait for something to happen.
And these OBRA laws
OBRA-90
have
is
been
what it
out
is.
since.
Yeah, they're almost 30 years old now, and it's not like they're not applicable anymore. We're not doing anything different when dispensing a prescription. We're just doing more of it. And that doesn't mean you can just disregard
disregard
what we've already. I mean, they're good things to follow. Like we've been talking about that all day.
The people know. They spend hours in a room saying, "What could possibly happen? What could possibly happen, and how could we prevent it? Let's put some rules in place and make sure we slow people down and know who you're getting, who's taking the prescription. Give the pharmacist a chop. What could possibly happen?" Well, the beauty of OBRA-90, federal law, it was as though they were predicting an opiate epidemic.
Right, you look at the purpose behind passing these laws, and it's reducing fraud, abuse, gross misuse of medications. To thwart
the abuse and misuse of prescription drugs. They wrote it to prevent exactly what we're seeing. And they got around it.
You trying to get the courts to recognize this and just examine it with the association.
See?
Just enforce what's already there.
We can't do the courts
what
now.
For
it's
you?
Public. The only route left to go is the public. We tried the professional association for 5 years. We tried to get the professional associations to accept the fact that there's workplace condition issues. That didn't go over, so we filed a lawsuit against the Board of Pharmacy. Yeah, we went to the Board of Pharmacy a couple of times. I made 2 trips down. And the reason the decision was made to file the lawsuit was after consideration. They gave 1 sentence in the minutes that didn't even refer to the fact that we gave them information about OBRA law violations. They didn't refer to it at all in the official minutes of the Board of Pharmacy, July of 2017. You know what they said? The board considered quality control issues at quality, something so vague and politically correct you wouldn't have been able to extract any. At that point, we realized they're just way overworked, or they're so busy dealing with all the problems we're sending their way, or they just aren't going to recognize us for one issue or another. We filed the lawsuit. The lawsuit was thrown out. You didn't have standing. There's no place left to go except for the public.
Yeah.
It's going to stop when the people realize these laws are put into place to prevent exactly what we're seeing, the problems we're seeing in the community. How could you not know OxyContin was addictive?
Yeah.
How could you go through all of these steps here of profiling information and getting information and adverse reactions? How could you go 2 decades and not know OxyContin has addictive properties to it, opposite of what the drug manufacturer was?
And maybe very good for the right patient. Right.
It'd be impossible. The laws are beautiful in the way they're set up to